What if I told you that the reason your grip feels weaker than it used to has nothing to do with your hands? It's not arthritis, it's not using your phone too much, it's not just getting older in some vague, nothing way that your doctor waves off in a 6-minute appointment. The real reason has a name you've probably never heard before: motor unit loss. And by the time we're done today, you'll understand why it might be quietly predicting a lot more than just how hard you can squeeze a jar lid. I'm a physical therapist who works almost exclusively with people over 60, mostly on strength, balance, and fall prevention. And here's why I'm bringing this to you today. A meta-analysis pooling data from 42 separate studies and more than 3 million adults found that for every 5 kilograms your grip strength drops, your risk of dying from any cause climbs by 16%. Not your risk of a bad grip, your risk of dying. That's how strong the connection is between the muscles in your hand and the length of your life. Let me tell you about Carol. Carol is 72, and about 8 months ago she started noticing she couldn't twist open the lid on her own spaghetti sauce anymore. Then it was the car key, which suddenly felt stiffer in the ignition, though nothing about the car had changed. Then it was her grandson's hand, which she used to squeeze tight crossing the parking lot, and now she just sort of held. She mentioned it to her doctor at her annual physical, and he told her, "That's pretty normal at your age, just try to watch your step and take it easy." Carol left that appointment feeling like something real was happening to her body, and nobody was actually explaining what it was. Before we get into exactly what's happening in Carol's hands and in yours, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the rest of this series, because next week's video builds directly on what you're about to learn. And do me one favor while you're at it. If you're enjoying this video, type 1 in the comments. If you're not, type 0, so I actually know how to make these better for you. So here's the visible problem. Jars feel tighter, doorknobs feel stiffer, and things slip out of your hand a little more than they used to. Most people, and most doctors on a rush schedule, chalk this up to wear and tear on the joints. But here's what's actually happening, and it has almost nothing to do with your joints. Every muscle in your hand is controlled by something called a motor unit. Think of it as a single nerve cell acting like a foreman, managing a small crew of muscle fibers underneath it. When your brain sends a signal to squeeze, that foreman relays the message to his crew, and they contract together. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. As we age, some of those foremen retire completely. The nerve cell dies off, and the muscle fibers underneath it go completely silent. They don't get weaker, they simply stop receiving instructions at all. Research on aging muscle has found that between the ages of 60 and 70 alone, we can lose up to 30% of the motor units in certain muscle groups. 30% of your foremen gone in a single decade. Now here's why this shows up in your hands before almost anywhere else. Your hands have one of the densest concentrations of motor units in your entire body, because fine motor control, buttoning a shirt, threading a needle, gripping a pen, requires an enormous number of small, precise nerve-to-muscle connections, far more per square inch than a muscle like your quadriceps or your bicep needs. That density is exactly why grip strength is often the earliest visible sign that this nerve and muscle retirement process has started, well before you'd notice it in a bigger muscle group like your legs or your chest. Researchers describe this same retirement process happening at the connection point itself, the junction where the nerve ending meets the muscle fiber. With age, that junction physically changes shape. The tidy, organized connection point becomes wider and messier, which makes the signal less reliable even in fibers that technically still have a foreman. So it's not just that some workers lose their foreman entirely, it's that even the ones who still have one are getting a fuzzier, less consistent set of instructions. Your hand is like the canary in the coal mine for your whole neuromuscular system. And that's exactly why doctors and researchers increasingly use a simple grip strength test as an early warning sign for the health of your muscles and nerves everywhere else in your body. Here's the hopeful part, and it's the whole reason I'm making this video instead of just letting you assume this is permanent. When a motor unit dies, the surviving motor units nearby don't just sit there, they can actually sprout new nerve branches and adopt some of the orphaned muscle fibers that lost their foreman, almost like a neighboring supervisor absorbing an extra shift of workers whose foreman retired. It's a real, documented biological process, not a metaphor I'm making up to sound encouraging. The problem is that adoption process is slow, imprecise, and it needs a stimulus to happen efficiently. And that stimulus is targeted resistance training, specifically training that asks the muscle to produce real, sustained tension rather than light, easy movement. Every exercise I'm about to show you is designed to do exactly that. Force your surviving motor units to fire more completely, recruit more of those orphaned fibers, and rebuild functional grip strength even though some of those original nerve connections are gone for good. This is not about turning back the clock on the nerve cells you've lost. It's about making the workforce you still have work smarter, fire more completely, and cover more ground than it currently is. Let's start with the first exercise, the towel ring. This one matters because it forces your wrist and forearm muscles to fire through a full rotational range, which is exactly the kind of complex, multi-directional signal that recruits the maximum number of surviving motor units at once, rather than a single, simple squeeze. It's also the closest thing on this list to a real-world movement, since ringing, twisting, and turning is exactly what your hands do when you're opening a jar or turning a stiff key. Here's how to do it. Take a dry hand towel, hold one end in each hand, about shoulder width apart, and twist it firmly in opposite directions, as if you're wringing water out of it. Hold the twist for about 3 seconds, then reverse direction and twist the other way. Do 10 full twists in each direction, then switch which hand leads so both sides get equal work. What to focus on? Most people twist from the wrist only and let the shoulder go slack. Instead, keep your elbows close to your body and really drive the twisting motion from your forearm, not just your fingers, so you feel the effort travel up past your wrist. Once this feels easy, you can progress it by wetting the towel slightly for more resistance, by holding each twist for a full 5 seconds instead of 3, or by using a slightly thicker, denser towel that's harder to compress. Next is the classic ball squeeze, and don't skip this one just because it sounds too simple. It's one of the most studied grip exercises there is, and it's the closest thing to the actual grip strength test researchers use in those mortality studies I mentioned earlier. This directly targets your finger flexor motor units, the ones responsible for the actual closing force of your grip, which is the exact group that starts losing form in first. Grab a soft therapy ball or even a stress ball, something with a little give to it. Hold it in the center of your palm and squeeze as hard as you comfortably can for a full 5 seconds, then release slowly over about 2 seconds rather than just letting go. Do 10 repetitions per hand before switching sides. What to focus on? The biggest mistake is squeezing fast and releasing fast, which barely engages your motor units at all. You want that slow, controlled release, because it's the sustained tension, not the quick burst, that recruits the deeper, harder to reach fibers. Once 10 reps feels easy on both hands, progress to a firmer ball, increase your hold to 7 full seconds per squeeze, or add a second set once you've built up some endurance. Now for an exercise almost every senior fitness routine skips entirely, and it's a big mistake: the rubber band finger spread. This is exactly the movement that was giving Carol so much trouble, actually, because when I finally worked with her a few weeks into our sessions, I found her finger extensors, the muscles that open your hand back up, were almost twice as weak as her flexors, even though her grip felt strong. That imbalance is incredibly common because everyday life trains you to grip constantly: jars, steering wheels, grocery bags, but almost never trains you to open your hand against resistance, so the extensor motor units get far less practice and end up weaker and slower to fire. Take a wide rubber band and loop it around all 5 fingers and your thumb. Spread your fingers outward against the band's resistance as far as you comfortably can. Hold for 2 seconds at the widest point, then return slowly, resisting the band the whole way back, rather than letting it snap your fingers closed. Do 12 repetitions. What to focus on? Don't rush the spread. Jerking your fingers open skips right past the motor units you're trying to activate. Move slowly enough that you feel real tension the entire time, both opening and closing. To progress, simply use a thicker, tighter band, double up 2 bands together, or slow the tempo down so each repetition takes a full 4 seconds instead of 2. The fourth exercise is thumb to finger touches, sometimes called the O exercise, and it targets something people almost never think about: your thumb opposition muscles, the ones that let your thumb rotate and meet your other fingers, which are responsible for a huge share of your overall hand function, including anything that requires pinching, like picking up a coin, threading a needle, or buttoning a shirt. With your hand relaxed and fingers loose, touch your thumb to the tip of your index finger, forming a rounded O shape, and hold for 5 seconds while pressing gently. Then move to your middle finger, then ring finger, then pinky, holding 5 seconds on each and forming that same rounded O every time. Do that full sequence 3 times per hand. What to focus on? Press firmly enough that you actually feel the pad of your thumb working against the pad of each finger, not just a light tap. A common mistake is letting this become a floppy, effortless touch instead of a real, gentle press with some actual muscular effort behind it. To progress, add light resistance by looping a thin rubber band around your thumb and whichever finger you're touching, so you're pressing against something instead of just touching skin to skin. Fifth is the wrist curl, which extends the strengthening work up into your forearm. Because your forearm muscles are actually where most of your grip's raw power is generated, your fingers are more like cables being pulled by that forearm engine, and strengthening that engine gives every one of the finger exercises we just did more to work with. Hold a light dumbbell or even a full water bottle if that's what you have around the house, and rest your forearm on your thigh or the arm of a chair with your wrist hanging just off the edge, palm facing up toward the ceiling. Slowly curl your wrist upward, bringing the weight toward you. Hold for 2 seconds at the top, then lower slowly and with control, not letting the weight drop. Do 12 repetitions, then flip your palm face down and repeat for another 12, which works the opposing muscle group on the back of your forearm. What to focus on? Keep the motion isolated to your wrist only. If your whole forearm is lifting off the table or chair arm, the weight is too heavy, or you're using momentum instead of controlled strength. To progress, add a small amount of weight, just a pound or two at a time, or slow each repetition down so the lift takes a full 3 seconds instead of 1. The sixth and final exercise is the farmer's carry, and I've saved it for last because it's the one that ties everything else together into something functional rather than just an isolated drill. This is where all those individual motor units you've been training in your fingers, your thumb, and your forearm have to fire together under sustained load exactly the way your grip works in real life, carrying groceries up the driveway, holding a suitcase handle through an airport, or gripping a grandchild's hand a little tighter while crossing a parking lot. Pick up something with a handle in each hand, like 2 full water jugs, a couple of grocery bags, or a pair of light dumbbells if you have them, and simply walk with them at your sides for 30 to 60 seconds, standing tall, keeping your shoulders back and your core gently engaged the whole time. Rest for a full minute, then repeat 2 more times. What to focus on? Resist the urge to hunch your shoulders forward or lean to one side as your grip fatigues near the end of the walk. That's your body compensating instead of your hand doing the actual work, and it defeats the purpose of the exercise. To progress, simply increase the carry time or the weight in small increments, 5 to 10 extra seconds or a pound or 2 more per side at a time. Before you start any of this, a few important notes, because these exercises need to fit your body, not the other way around. If you have arthritis in your hands or wrists, particularly during a flare-up, check with your doctor or a physical therapist before adding resistance work. And consider starting with the gentlest version of each exercise, using no added weight or band resistance at all until the joint calms down. If you've had a recent hand, wrist, or forearm fracture or surgery, get direct clearance from your surgeon first, since the healing tissue needs a specific timeline before it can safely handle resistance, and pushing too early can set your recovery back. If you have carpal tunnel syndrome, or any numbness, tingling, or a pins and needles feeling that runs down into your fingers, some of these motions can aggravate the nerve rather than the muscle, so go slowly, start with fewer repetitions than recommended, and stop immediately if you feel any tingling or shooting sensation. If you're on blood thinners or have a diagnosed condition affecting circulation in your hands, mention that to your doctor as well before starting a new resistance routine. And as a general rule for everyone, mild muscle fatigue, a warm, tired feeling in the hand and forearm, is normal and expected, but any sharp, shooting, or joint-level pain means you stop that exercise immediately, not push through it, and reach out to your doctor if it doesn't settle down within a day or 2. So let's go back to Carol for a second. 6 weeks after we started working through almost this exact sequence together, she called me, genuinely excited, because she'd opened a new jar of pickles on her own, first try, no running it under hot water, no asking her husband to come loosen it for her first. That's not a coincidence, and it's not really about the jar at all. It's about the fact that her surviving motor units had learned to fire more completely and recruit more of those orphaned muscle fibers we talked about earlier, because she gave them a reason to, week after week, 1 towel ring and 1 ball squeeze at a time. That's what's actually available to you here too, starting today with whatever you have around your own house. This was never really about your grip strength as some isolated number on a dynamometer somewhere. It's about whether you can still turn a stiff key on the first try, still carry your own grocery bags up the stairs without setting them down halfway, still hold your grandchild's hand tightly enough, crossing a street or a parking lot, that they know without a doubt you've got them. That's what a stronger grip is actually protecting, and it's worth a few minutes of your day. Next week, I want to show you a simple standing test that can tell you more about your fall risk in the next 10 seconds than almost anything else, and how a few targeted exercises can change that number faster than most people expect. Until then, here's to living life on your own terms. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1. If you didn't, comment 0. And please like, share, and subscribe so this can reach the next person who needs to hear it.